Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Dept. At The Reason We Learn, we aspire to be part of the solution. The purpose of this show is to take a good, honest, potentially painful look at the way kids are being educated. We know we can do better, and this is where we'll talk about how. Let's learn something. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Dept. I've got a great show for you today. Lynne Taylor is back, our Commoncore Diva. And today she is telling us about food and what our government is doing with food and our money to keep us and our kids, especially our kids, because our kids are fed more government cheese than anybody, to keep them sort of malleable, pliable, not healthy, but sick. So they can be more easily manipulated, led, etc. It may sound crazy, but Lynne's going to explain to you what she has found and how it's, only crazy in its implementation, but it's actually happening. So let's welcome Lynne back to the show and we'll hear all about it. Hello.
Well, hello. Hi, Deb. It's so wonderful to be back. And thank you so much. And, this is such a topic that I know no one is really talking about, but we need to start having this conversation because our federal government has seen it necessary through education to use so much of their power, especially through public-private partnerships, to influence not only what we think, what we learn, but how we're medicated. And now we've seen them do it through our food. Now, we know long ago there was the food pyramid, then it changed to my plate, and it was still a bunch of garbage either way you did it. Well, now on the table are these new proposed school nutrition health standards that will go into not just Johnny and Susie at the public school, but the entire community, because as we know, some of the government overreach through our communities is using the public school as the hub for you to get everything you could possibly need, because after all, the government's here to help you be the best that you can be.
Help you.
Yes, help you to be the best
you can
be.
Were those the most terrifying words in the English language? I'm from the government. I'm here to help.
Absolutely. And what got me onto this was there's a website out there called Action for Healthy Kids. And if you go to that particular website, you're going to see, we have 1 in 7 children who have food problems. Then it goes on and it starts listing all these statistics, but it's not till you get down to close to the bottom, Deb, that you see, we're going to attach this to social and emotional learning because after...
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
You keep going and you're going to...
And what do we know? Yeah, opportunities for educators. Oh, look, apply for grants.
Yes, because more government money is going to solve the problem.
Oh my God. Improve school health policies and programs, resources.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where we're encroaching on parents and their families, because this is going to say about your community, because they have to have the school be a willing partner to overreach into your family to say, you're not educating in the way that we see that you need to. You're not medicating in the way that we need you to. So now we're going to start looking at how you're feeding your family.
Collective impact.
Oh, right? Gee, where have we heard that before?
Who their sponsors and partners are.
Okay, Aldi, Walmart. I'm not surprised about Walmart. Kellogg's, I'm not surprised about. Nike, okay, CSX, Cargill. Well, that makes sense because they make fertilizer that and feed and everything. Right. Okay, so there you go. Dole, not surprised about that. Oh, Peloton, the one with the creepy data mining exercise stuff.
Exactly.
Oh, man.
And it just keeps going.
Oh,
Friends.
It does. Absolutely.
What else do we have here? Campbell Soup Foundation. Yeah. Anonymous. Wonder who that is.
Oh, probably Bill Gates. Okay, DuPage. That's going to be tied, I think, into DuPont. I might be wrong on that one. But yeah.
But isn't it kind of funny? We have this like visionaries, people who want to get taxpayer dollars when you've gotten done. You notice how before they said, what parent resources for parents,
right?
Now, what I find interesting are opportunities for parents and caregivers. They have make the case for school health. So in other words, they're saying be an activist on
Mhm.
behalf of this. And I'm sure our partners who happen to sell the things.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
The thing that got me was, we know how toxic the social and emotional manipulation is, but now we're attaching it to food because, after all, you can't have a healthy mind if you don't have a healthy diet. Well, I'm sorry, when you start eating government food, that is not a healthy diet to feed a healthy mind.
And we now know, most of us know that mass produced, highly processed food, the kind they sell a lot of.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying they sell no healthy food there. I'm just saying the real money makers
Yeah,
are not your fresh fruits and vegetables. It's a labor intensive thing to grow
right.
fruit and vegetables. The profit margin's pretty small, and
Yeah,
a lot more money that you're going to get from all the packaging and all the other stuff. There's very little nutritional value. We know this. This has been
yeah,
known for decades.
yeah,
But these people want a piece of that government pie. There is so much money going into the schools in terms of feeding now breakfast and lunch.
yeah.
They want some of that money, but it's not in their best interest from a profit, even though they're getting government money to buy it, they're
Right.
still going to
Oh,
get more profit from it
mm-hmm.
if they're selling them the high, the sugar or the
Right,
mass produced stuff with lots of fertilizer and chemicals and everything else,
right.
which, as we know, weakens our immune system and makes us ripe for what? The pharmaceutical products.
Exactly. And I was just gonna say something about that because, it is tied into the fact of, well, if I eat what the government tells me to eat, not only does it weaken my body, but it makes me where, oh, I'm a prime candidate for that doctor's visit. That, oh my goodness, is tied into education as well, because we've seen the overreach, especially through the social and emotional learning over the questionnaires about what goes on at home, who's doing what to who, what are, all. So it all is interlocking. And one of the other ways that it is through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Now, these are the proposed health nutrition standards for school meals. Now, when you go to the U.S. Department of Agriculture's website and you look at what we have now for school nutrition and what they're proposing, it may not look and sound quite so bad until you get the picture of what's behind it, which is less real food and more manufactured food. And the more manufactured it is, the more chemicals, additives, dyes, things that keep us unhealthy. But again, you can't be manageable if you're not weak. And this is one of the ways to do it. And one of the things that I noticed was that the proposed standards, which are supposed to take effect, I believe it is by the 2026-27 school year, we're going to phase out cow's milk and we're going to put in all these plant-based milks. Okay. Now, I realize some people do have a legitimate lactose intolerance. I don't argue that. But to rule out cow's milk, now let's think about this from the other end. A farmer has that cow. That milk is the bread and butter, quite literally, for that farm. And if you start impacting the availability of fresh dairy and fresh meat and things like that, you're really starting to monkey with the population. And that's where this is headed. Now, one of the reasons I want to bring this up is because not only is milk, cow's milk, dairy products, grains, things like that, sodium. Okay, we're going to start to see where they're coming up with alternatives for the meat as well, which leads us to the fact that we have, and I'll give you an example out of Utah in just a second, okay? But one of the things that I wanted to bring up was that there is a protein there is a component of insects, and it is chitin. It is totally indigestible to human beings. So all these worms, all these bugs, all these things that we're being told, oh, are good for us, crickets, things like that. What this particular chitin does is it latches on to anything that's already existing in you, Deb, that is unhealthy and makes it worse, therefore making you more susceptible to needing what? Government assistance.
Well, it's also self-defeating too, because
Yeah.
after a point, a sick population, an unhealthy population that has a lot of needs that are expensive. I mean,
Right.
healthcare is expensive. Medication,
Oh,
no
yeah.
matter how much they want to sell it to us, is expensive.
Right.
The production and distribution of all this is expensive. Energy is expensive. All these things are expensive. You start having a sickly or dying population. Who is there to pay all the taxes, to work and produce and pay the taxes that are going to be needed for all these things? So what
Yep.
ends up happening is when I tell people about these things, their
Mhm.
brain can't quite grasp it because they say, but that doesn't make sense, because if they did that, then there'd be nobody to pay their tax. I'm like, when
Oh, yes, there
did
will
they
be.
ever well, there might be,
Go
but
ahead.
that's not
Yeah,
the
go ahead.
point. When did they make decisions based on what made sense in the long term? They
Right.
don't think that way.
They
They think
don't.
about what's going to make me money in the next 10 years. They're not
Right.
looking at the next 100 years. They're not really
Right.
looking at it, with the exception of political power. So they'll look
Mhm.
ahead to, like, how much power can I have if I do this? But I
Right.
only personally care in terms of its impact on me or whatever for about 10 years. And
Right.
everything in between is left for the rest of us to worry about.
Absolutely. And you do bring up a good point. Now, the reason why we wanted to show you these two particular websites, everyone, is so that when you want to on your own time, go back and really look at these in depth. But Deb, if we would, let's switch to full screen because we're done with those resources. And
Okay.
this is a breaking story. This is out of Utah. Okay. Students had to eat bugs and told it was the only right answer to cows destroying the climate. Now, this is published by cowboystatedaily.com, which is a newspaper out of Wyoming. And they show you this terrible picture of a bunch of darn bugs. Okay. And it goes on to tell you a Utah middle school teacher wanted to drive home a message about eating meat being bad for the climate. So she had her students eat bugs while refusing to let them object to the idea that insect consumption is a good idea. Okay, the sixth grade class at this middle school in Utah's Nebo School District were given samples of insects that were safe for consumption as part of a lesson on reducing carbon emissions by switching from red meat to insects. The students were then instructed to write an argumentative essay in support of bug eating as a means to address the climate change. They were not allowed to disagree or take an opposing position because there was only one right answer. Now, it goes on to tell you that if you look at what cows really admit when they toot, it's 2.5% of all greenhouse gas, but yet they're the sole problem. This is insane. This is taking junk science and grooming our children for more manipulation and then saying, oh, but we're doing it because we give a really big fig about what you eat.
Well, and then I just saw a study recently that said there's an ingredient in meat. There's a particular amino acid in meat
Mm-hmm.
that we need, and especially
Mm-hmm.
seniors need,
Right.
and that the extremely low consumption of this particular amino acid has
Right.
been correlated with the development of senility and Alzheimer's. That
And
the
I don't doubt that at all. I don't. I had a mother who suffered from Alzheimer's, and if you look at the age she was and the diet and everything that had been going on, of course she hated the federal government. She wouldn't take a government anything if you handed it to her. So, but your point is absolutely valid. We need some of the proteins that are in our meats, not just red meats, other meats as well.
Yep.
But we've got a bill sitting in Congress right now, Deb, that would cull the population of this nation and give, there's that one bill that would do that. Because after all, we don't have enough people eating this. So after all, we don't need to have that many farmers doing this. Well, now you're talking about skewing the economy because now you're going to put them out of work. And then we have another bill that's going, oh, but you know what? If Farmer Joe wants to turn his farm into a solar panel farm for public utilities, we'll give them tax credits.
Yeah, it's actually getting really scary because
Yeah.
when they control the food supply, folks,
Oh,
they
absolutely.
own you. I mean, we
Mhm.
know that Mao decimated his own population by deciding how farmers would plant their crops.
Yeah.
And his Lysenkoism resulted in the starvation of 50 million people.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, you've got a non-farmer telling farmers how to grow
Mhm.
things on the basis of some pseudoscience. And then what did we end up having? Starving people. That was just the first 50 million people who died.
Oh,
And then, of
yeah.
course, there were another
Absolutely.
50 million people that he
Yeah.
killed through other means because people were starving, they were cannibalizing each other. It was
Right.
absolutely people can't even begin to understand the horrors of Mao's China. And for the vast majority of people did not die from murder. It wasn't like Stalin, where Stalin, I mean, a lot of
Right.
people died in famines in Stalin's Russia for similar reasons, right? When he killed the
Yes.
gulags. But it's not like they lined them all up against a wall in China. These people
Right.
died. And what
Yeah.
is amazing to me, Lynn, you're bringing us this information about our food supply and food policy. In other words,
Right.
what the government's going to do with one of our biggest budget items, which is education,
Mhm.
and with the piece that is food associated with education, and they want to make changes to what's acceptable in food stamps, which is another piece of the food pie. Okay. And as Lynn pointed out, if they do that with that big a chunk of money that goes to food, it will impact the rest of us who buy our own food because the livestock won't be there to slaughter for us to go buy with our own money. So even those of us who say, well, that's fine, they can't make me eat the bugs or they can't make my kids eat the stuff because they don't go to public school or whatever. I get news for you. If they skew the supply, you won't be able to buy it either. And
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
this is what's happening. And these are the same people that we now know it's not a conspiracy theory anymore. We now know for a fact
Mhm.
committed democide with the COVID policy. We know for a fact that they lied and they obfuscated and they obscured and they marketed and they did all, they fact check censored us into death
Yep.
by the millions. If it wasn't from COVID itself, it was from other causes. It was from clots. It was from myocarditis and heart related issues. It was from denial of medical care. You name it. We haven't even begun to see how many people have yet to die from COVID policy, which was 100% government caused. And now we're going to let them touch our food supply to this
Oh,
degree?
oh, but Deb, don't you know this is part of the solution because
Yes,
everything that,
that the funny
yeah,
thing about calling something part of the solution is if you don't
mhm,
define the problem the same way,
I understand. You
it
understand
might
and
be
I
solving
understand.
something, but it's not the
Right.
problem I have.
Exactly, exactly. But this is the logic that's being played against us. And I want to point out, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, otherwise known as SNAP, Children's Health Insurance Program, known as CHIP. These funding streams go directly into your public schools, but through the Every Student Succeeds Act, Deb, what happened when they said that all education had to be the same? It meant it didn't matter what choice you were in. We're going to use the school to help bring these funds together and use them against you. And that's what's happening because SNAP and CHIP are used in your formulation for how much taxes are taken out of your property tax and applied to the school. And then, of course, all the streaming services that come into your school that are using them, especially under the name of COVID, for community relief. This is why we need to be raising this issue, is because it is not about the public school anymore. It is about your community, your existence.
That word community is so charged at this point. I hear
Oh, it
it and I
is.
get like the bile rises in my throat because it doesn't mean anymore what people think it means. It doesn't
Oh,
mean what I mean by community, etc. It means something more akin to commune, like
well,
communism.
okay, all right, let's look at it this way. Neighborhoods. It'll be your neighborhood because, after all, we're being hemmed in by these neighborhoods. And, Promised Neighborhood is also Promised Neighborhood Child Development Blocks, Healthy Childhood Development Block Grants. All these things are being factored into your neighborhood. So let's use that instead of community. So, yeah, it'll be your neighborhood. I have a school that is within walking distance of me. It has not been opened up to my neighborhood yet with these services, but it's coming because we've
What I
seen it
really
happen in other places.
what I really would like for people to do is to look at how many years, decades, government has been involved to this level with what our children eat, where they go to school, what they learn at school, all these kinds of things.
Think, how do they feel?
Exactly. Go back. I mean, I won't take you all the way back to the beginning, even though that's where you should go. Just go back to Great Society. Just go back to Lyndon Johnson. I mean, you could go farther, but just stop
Yeah,
there for your
yeah.
convenience and just start to look at what happened to neighborhoods where Black families, for an example, had equity. Right. And then
Yeah.
it was like, you don't want that ramshackle house. You want this big, beautiful housing project where we provide everything. And there's a school and there's a medical facility and there's this and that. Anyway, just go back to that decade. And then I
Mhm.
want you to look at the statistics because we do have the real numbers.
Oh,
Look at
yeah.
school performance, look at literacy rates, look at rates of heart disease, obesity, diabetes, all of these things. And that's from then to now. Now take what Lynne is saying, NSEL and DEI and CRT and the all the stuff, the community school with the medical center and the gender and all the stuff, and take those results that look like this, add that stuff in. Where do you think we're going to be in another decade? What do you think we're going to have as far as an obesity rate, an illiteracy rate, a diabetes rate, a death rate in terms of premature death? Our life expectancy in the United States for the first time, I think, in 40 or 50 years went down.
Yeah.
And people say, oh, that was COVID. No.
No, it wasn't.
No. They just, in fact, one could make a decent case that COVID was planned or implemented when it was to help them cover for what was already a massive decline that was about to catch up with us. And we would have had no other thing to blame it on but all of these policies. So, we have a pandemic. See, it was all the everything is COVID. Very convenient to cover up the failures that have been many decades in the making. It wasn't COVID at all. So, I mean, COVID added, but we were going to see statistics without COVID.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you bring that up because, if you look at the proposed fiscal year 2024 budget from the president, you're going to see a lot of this stuff is repeated in there as well. But you'll also see future pandemic planning. What does that say to you?
So, yeah.
If we didn't do it to you bad enough before now, we're really going to start trying to ramp it up in the next one.
So now you know that what people are skeptics in the audience, and you should be skeptical, folks. I mean, don't come to my channel. I don't expect you to come here and go, whatever she said, it's true. I want you to look at these links. I want you to go. They'll all be in the description. I want you to go read everything that Lynne has given us. Look at it. Go down the rabbit hole for yourself. And then you can answer these questions for yourself. But I'm sure there's some of you out there right now saying, but why? Like, to what end? They still have a hard time, Lynne, wrapping their minds around the fact that there are people in this world who just want control, who want to be the name of the boss of everyone else.
Yep, that is it. You know nothing. You're gonna, you know nothing. So therefore, we're going to coddle you, nanny you. We're going to feed you, put you to work. We're gonna, barely educate you because remember, the data that comes from all of this, because trust me, there will be data collection because that's being ramped up as well. Because again, part of one of the bills, especially to amend the tax code for farmers to turn their farms into solar panels for public use, includes data mining. Because after all, that's the new cash cow. That's what we're being replaced with. And we're worth more on an automated system than we are living and breathing. So why would the government give a rat's bottom about how healthy we are?
Right. And if you go back and you study, because there's tons of research on this, actually, if you study the techniques used by cults, for example, when they're trying to bring people into the cult, when you look at even, past political regimes where they were trying to re-educate people in re-education camps, one of the key parts of their program is a diet high in sugar, low in protein, so sugar and or simple carbohydrates, very low in protein, especially the kind of amino acids that do feed your neurology, feed your brain. We were talking about the elderly people, because if you can be in a constant state of overwhelm, in other words, where your cognitive function is not so great and your hormones are all out of whack because so you can't self-regulate. In other words, you can't regulate everything from your body temperature to your mood. It's really difficult when you don't have your hormones are dramatically impacted by your nutrition. That's true if you're male or female, it doesn't matter, child or adult. And once your hormones are out of whack, then so is everything else. All the other systems don't work properly. And your body is in a constant fight or flight struggle mode. And when it's in constant fight or flight fear struggle mode, it will much more readily submit to any form of authority, because that's a survival skill. So if somebody strong comes along and says, I have the answer, this is what you need to do, the human being is literally wired to follow that to stay alive. We see it with our children, I do it with our adults. Even if the adult doesn't have their best interest in heart, they'll like do it because they're driven to stay alive. So this is actually can be scientifically planned, orchestrated right down to the meal. They can decide how many grams of this and how many, ounces of that the average person needs, male or female biologically, to have their hormones dysregulated just enough to be malleable, but not so much that they're completely dysfunctional. In other words, they can't go to work at all. But you just end up with a population that would be, people talk a lot about the population in the Soviet Union. They drank so much, right? People have a lot of alcoholics. Drinking the vodka, they go to work, do your factory job, and then go drink your alcohol, whatever. Are you likely to rise up and rebel and fight back and protest? And not really. You're tired. You're sleeping off a hangover because that's the only thing that got you out through that day, because your brain is just so overwhelmed. And eventually you end up with kids, when you start reproducing, whose cognitive function is already lower at birth. IQs go down. Now, the children of the elite, the children of the Bill Gateses of the world and the Klaus Schwabs of the world, they're not going to eat this garbage.
Nope.
You think they're going to eat what you're going to eat? Get a grip. They're not going to eat what they're going to have a whole completely different food supply, a completely different world that feeds them. So they'll be fine sitting in their little gated universe. But the rest of us are going to be, like in a constant state of, we're fat, but we're not healthy.
Yeah. If you've ever heard the old phrase, fat, dumb, and happy, that's not going to be us. That is not going to be us at all.
We'll be fat and dumb.
We'll be fat and dumb. That's right. Absolutely. And, it just stymies me that people, I appreciate the whistleblowers on so many of the things that we're seeing going on. But if we're not looking at those as the distraction that they are, we would miss things like this, which we weren't supposed to find out. But yet, because you have someone who researches, because you have someone who's nosy and wants to connect the dots, you've got this. Now, as Deb said, take everything that I will have given her as far as links, look at it, take your time, because you've got to be able to see where it started in all this mess and where they're taking it. But think about what else is going to go on with this, because if you think about it, the federal government, through the Department of Agriculture, in conjunction with the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, is recognized by the United Nations, Deb, as a credible research entity. Now, let's think about this for just a second. First of all, the EPA is a non-governmental organization, taxpayer-funded entity in our government. The Department of Agriculture is also a federal agency. Can you name how many of those are constitutionally created? Thank you. A big fat zero.
Goose egg.
Big fat zero. But yet we're supposed to not question when the UN says, oh, we're going to recognize you guys as research. No. No. What are you going to do with that research? Precisely what we're seeing happen, and who knows what else coming down behind it.
Well, what makes me sad is how many people will look at this and say, well, but what else would we do, Deb? I mean, who's going to feed the kids? And I'm like, I'm sorry. Is there such a thing as a parent anymore? I mean, what happened to packing a school lunch? What happened? Oh, people can't afford that. I'm like, realistically, more people can afford it than you're claiming, first of all. Second of all, if they're getting food stamp, in other words, EBT
Right.
cards,
Right.
they're getting food. They could prepare at home. They
Yeah.
don't need to go to school and also be fed the breakfast and the lunch. That's what the EBT card was for. And then, so you're now putting it, so it's like whatever's there at the school that they feel like feeding the kid. And now it's breakfast and lunch. And they liked it. Then they do it in New York all summer too, even when school's not in session.
See
And
what I mean? Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
I said, look at the results. The results are we have a overwhelming population of obese children. We never had obese children. When I was a kid, I'm looking back into like my fourth grade class. There were
Right.
exactly 0 fat kids. There were 0
We had
kids that were even
none.
pudgy.
We
0.
we didn't have anyone in that particular predicament. We absolutely didn't. But we also didn't have a big population who was participating in the reduced breakfast or the reduced lunch.
My elementary school didn't have a cafeteria.
Wow.
My public elementary school had the gym. Okay,
Yeah.
we had a gymnasium and they had tables, the kind that like they're folded up like this and you roll them
Oh,
out and you do
yeah.
this to them.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we had those tables and the custodian each day would go and like unfold them, the little benches. We'd bring our little lunch box. We'd sit, we'd eat with our lunch, and then they'd fold it up and then we'd have gym class or whatever. We didn't have a cafeteria in any of the elementary schools in my town in New Jersey when I was growing up, and that was in the
Wow.
70s. And
Okay.
then, so the first time there was an actual cafeteria in my world was middle school. And I even remember going into there and the food was not half bad. I mean, it wasn't like I brought my lunch 4 days out of 5, but it was
Right.
considered almost like a treat to bring some cash because maybe you could get that chocolate milk or you could get that
Yeah.
slice of or something.
That chocolate milk was the dry end. I tell you what, it absolutely
Right.
was.
And
Well,
and sometimes they'd have that American chop suey with the like macaroni with the beef and stuff, and that was pretty good. But the main thing was it was there for the kids who had, free and reduced lunch. It was a very small population, and then the rest of us, if you wanted to buy lunch, you could buy lunch. But most people,
yeah, absolutely. But here's what I remember, and I don't know what year you were in those grades. I know that the cafeterias that I had, they were also the auditorium because we didn't have a big enough. We were a rural school, and we didn't
right?
have enough whatever to be able to have a dedicated cafeteria. And even in high school, our cafeteria was shared with auditorium. So it's really strange how we were able to survive all that. Just terrible
However,
stuff.
did we
How
put a
did we
man on
do
the
it?
moon
I
without all
don't
of this
know.
free and reduced lunch? It's no,
I don't
it is
know.
it's crazy. And I think people get used to whatever is, and they think it was always thus, or they think the people before were
Mhm.
suffering so grievously. And it's like, no, or oh, we didn't have as many immigrants. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. We've always
Okay.
had immigrants.
Okay, I will tell
Always.
you, the first experience I had with an immigrant family was, now this is in Podunky, little old South Georgia. Okay. It's where I grew up. And again, we're a rural county and we have our schools. And this one family comes in, they had immigrated, I believe it was from South Korea, or maybe it was North Korea. I don't know. I was very, very young. All I knew was they looked totally different than us. They didn't speak the same language, but we had a wonderful time getting to know each other. We saw different foods. They would always bring their lunch. They never bought lunch. My folks made sure I never, ever had to buy lunch. Every once in a while when I got to high school, or if mom was sick and she couldn't pack a lunch, daddy would do it, or sometimes we would do our own. But the point of it is we rarely ate a school lunch. And like you said, if we did, it was a treat because you got the chocolate milk, because you couldn't get that anywhere else. But anyway, the point of it was that we did just fine. We didn't have the school intervening in what we were thinking or what we were eating like they're doing today. And we have 2 new bills. They are so new, introduced this past week. So I can't even get a summary of what they are, but they will amend the Keep the Kids Fed Act, as in we're going to feed the kids. And then the other is to amend the School Lunch Act that's in existence. And what do you want to bet it's going to tie into these new proposed standards where less is somehow better, or a substitute is better than what, we were given naturally.
Right. Well, it's, I get frustrated. We talked about this before we started recording. I get frustrated because as a person who leans, libertarian, I'm very free market oriented. I'm a free
Right.
market here. I see corporations, giant corporations, big businesses, et cetera, getting on board with this. And it's tempting for some people to say, see, this is all about profits and whatever. And I'm like, hold the phone. They couldn't be doing this. They couldn't be part of these initiatives if there wasn't a giant pot of tax money that was coerced away from people
Right.
by force to come begging for. Like,
Yeah.
hey, we're Walmart. We'll do it. Help you. We'll do it. Okay. So if Walmart had to sell their wares directly to the town, but I mean to the people of the town, like,
Right.
hi, we'd like to be the ones providing your school lunch that you will bring your actual money into the school and buy, and we'd like to, the opportunity to do that. I think then you'd get more healthy, nutritious food because the people would just not show up with this. They'd go to their own grocery store, they'd make their own lunch, and they'd send their kids to school. But when they can go to around you, and they can go to government and go, we'll fund your campaign and we'll help you with this and we'll market and we'll do the things that help you get the power to give us the stuff. That's not capitalism, guys.
No,
that's not
it's
free
absolutely
market.
not.
That's a weird, creepy form of fascism that is, it's not socialism either. It's fascism because there's still private corporations with your tax dollars, and they're coming in going, do what we say. And the corporation's going, can I have some tax money? Yes, you can. Okay, fine. That is not ethical business practices.
No, it's not.
I don't support that. As a free marketeer, I 100% oppose that. That is rent seeking. That's not what you're supposed to do.
Right. But this is what we've seen our government do hand over fist with us for decades. Because if you go back and you look at the Constitution, there were only very few things that we were supposed to be taxed on. And what it's been turned into is an absolute nightmare, especially your property tax, because it's not property tax, it's glorified rent. You're renting from the government and you think you own it. This is a deception.
Yep. And the thing is too that, as I said, the longer it goes on, the deeper ingrained the perception that this is the only way to get it done. I mean, I talk to people every day who are like, well, how would you propose to educate children if you didn't have this? And I'm like, are you serious?
Oh, like, come on.
Seriously believe that but for government, everybody would be illiterate, or but for government, we'd have no roads, but for government, we'd have no way to get the mail from point A to point B or whatever. I mean, even when there's evidence to the contrary, in other words, there are homeschoolers, there are private schools, there's all kinds of other opportunities. Even when people are out there building toll roads that are like get up faster and are like get you where you want to go better and are better maintained and everything, they're like somehow that's exclusive that there's a toll road. Most people I know, because the kinds of taxes end up being so regressive to pay for roads, they'll use like sales tax, gas tax, all this stuff.
Right.
Most people rather say, you know what, I'm not a very wealthy person, so I'm going to opt not to take the toll road. I can choose.
Yeah.
I'll choose to take this road versus that road so I can pay less. When the government is building all the roads, you can't choose. Even if you don't drive, you're an 80-year-old woman who's never driven in her life, you're paying for roads.
Absolutely. Well, we need
that's the problem.
Right. And we need to flip the conversation from but for government to the government's after my butt, because they absolutely are.
100%. And your kids.
And more important, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because if this doesn't impact you personally, immediately, it's going to go for those who you love or those who you are in charge of. And, if it's not going to impact you personally, think about this. If you really want to hurt someone, you could go after that person. Okay. But if you really, really, really want to put the screws to them, go after someone they love. And that's the target that is on our children's back in education, with yet another component to this blasted social and emotional manipulation.
Right. And we've already had questions arise about food ingredients in terms of whether there's a link to autism, whether there's a
Exactly.
link to ADHD, whether there's even a link to the sort of feminization of little boys. A
Right.
lot of their, sort of typical masculine traits of like more muscle, muscle mass, their
Hmm.
higher voices, slighter frames, shorter, they're getting shorter. For a long time, people were getting taller.
Taller now. Yeah.
Now they're going back the other way. Why is that? We know there's soy in just about everything at this point because it's cheap. It's drought and pest resistant, especially the genetically modified version. There's almost no non-genetically
Right.
modified soy at this point. You
Right.
can grow it just about anywhere, and you can make it into all kinds of things, and it doesn't really taste like anything. It tastes like the
Yeah.
salt and sugar you add to it. So soy is becoming it's literally everything. Now a lot of people are allergic. My daughter's allergic to soy, so
Oh,
I have to
I am too.
read
I can't
labels
have
like
it.
crazy.
Yeah.
And you're going to see more of that too. You're going to start see people who develop allergies because the stuff is so toxic and it's in
Hmm.
everything. And then what are they going to eat when they've gotten rid of the real dairy and the real meat and the real this? You're going to have a population of people who are malnourished because they're allergic to half of the garbage.
Oh, yeah.
That human beings didn't evolve to eat these franken foods.
No, we
I'm
didn't.
sorry.
No, we were given commands on what we could and what we couldn't. And it was always anything that swims that has scales. It was let's see, it was livestock without the cloven hoof, and it was there were certain birds, I believe, and then it was every fruit, herb, and vegetable. Now we have a lot of people out here who are, well, these are all bad, and I'm only going to go with the fruits and the vegetables and the herbs. Well, okay, there's a time and a place for that. But if you only eat that, you're not going to be as healthy as if you incorporated these other things and left all that processed garbage and all the other things. And, here's the thing, you talk about food with health. Go back, if you doubt any of this, and look at the years of devastation that Monsanto and Bayer and companies like that have wreaked upon our agricultural scene. Then go look at all the decades old studies and the pioneers who are in healthcare trying to find good solutions for people with cancer or diabetes or things like that. And they will all agree on this, Deb. Not so much in America, but in other countries. Food is what feeds your disease. And the better food you have in your body, the less disease you have. The more garbly goo your food is, the more disease. But see, our government knows this. Why do you think they stamp out everything that could possibly be come up with to help us cure some of these things naturally? Because there's not the profit that you were talking about to be made. There's not the billions of dollars in the industry to be made.
And they can't buy the land. So
Right.
as long as there's a successful ranch or a successful pig farm or a successful chicken farm or a successful what that's doing okay and and there's a market for their goods, whatever, then people can't come up and buy up the land because in addition to the food, they want to own our ability to feed ourselves, which means
Right.
owning the land.
Yep.
And at this point, the federal government owns an obscene amount of American land
They do.
that
They
they're putting
absolutely do.
zero purpose. And, you really have to start to wonder, like, why does the government own so much land? And why is somebody like Bill Gates buying up so much farmland? And why are we selling farmland and food production facilities to China? Like, why are
Yeah,
we doing that? And that all goes together. These things
it
are not
does.
separate from education. Some of you I can hear even like through the screen, I hear people going, Dad, this is an education channel. What are you talking about? Well, you cannot learn. You can't. Your brain doesn't function properly if you're malnourished.
It
Now,
doesn't.
but you can't judge by looking at a person that they're malnourished. You might think you can. Oh, they're super skinny and scrawny, whatever. No, I've known plenty of very thin people who are extremely healthy. And I've known some overweight people or like morbidly obese who can barely put a thought together because they eat nothing but sugar and salt
Mhm.
and processed food. And they're in a constant state of hormonal dysregulation and they can't think straight and they sleep all the time. That is what they want us to be. Basically, if you saw the movie WALL-E from Pixar, that's the ultimate goal, is we're just lumps.
But
And
this brings up another argument as far as people thinking, oh, well, this doesn't have anything to do with education. I was probably a year or so ago, maybe a little longer, but I did a show where we were talking about the manipulation of, there was all the guise of body positivity if we didn't start including all body shapes. Okay. And
Yes.
so to try to drive home this point, this higher education university decided, well, we're going to make skinny people put on fat suits, and we're going to see how discriminatory we are. The whole thing was absolute poppycock because it was like putting all the pressure on the student to conform to something first they may not have agreed with, but like this middle school assignment that we were talking about earlier, you weren't allowed to disagree. You had to go along with this because there was somehow this false narrative going on out there. Now, I know there's real discrimination. Okay, I've seen it happen in real life between one body size and another. But here's the thing, we we need to understand that these kinds of attitudes are being forced on our kids at every age, not just little people, not just young people, but adults as well. We cannot force what someone conceives to be a discrimination or a problem and then
Right.
say, well, we all have to get on board for that, because what that teaches is that what you might be feeling is not near as important as what everybody else feels.
Right. And that is the crux of it. If
Yeah.
you want to make people like other centric, you need to weaken them and take away their autonomy. And the thing, taking away your autonomy over your own body, they did it with COVID. Wear a mask, get a vaccine, stay home. You have no body autonomy. Well, if they're going to feed your kids whatever they say your kids should eat, and they're going to have control down to if you look at the documents that I'm going to link to that Lynne gave us, they want to regulate down to the milligrams of sodium.
They do. It is absolutely horrible.
Yep. And some people will read that. I'll just warn you. Some of you will look at the charts from the USDA and you'll say, I don't see the problem here. They want to reduce the amount of sugar and reduce the amount of sodium, and they want to do this and do that. And I'm like,
but
it's
look what they
all
want to put in its place.
That's right. There's that. And you have to look at how they're going to do it. Remember, lactose is a sugar. Okay. Lots of things are sugars. There's a difference between cane sugar and naturally occurring sugars. So if I reduce the grams of sugar by saying no more, I'm going to remove some fruit, or I'm going to remove dairy. Oh, look, I just lowered the amount of sugar, but what I put in its place was refined garbage sugar,
which
or
is
beet sugar, or something like that in its place. Have you really reduced sugar? Or have you just supplemented good sugar for crappy sugar?
Yep. And let me point this out, that gluten, so many of us are allergic to gluten. I'm one of them. It's a protein that my body cannot break down. But under this new proposed standard, if I'm going to limit proteins, Deb, I've just gotten rid of all the really good ones. And what did I stick back in its place? Bread. And look at how many people cannot eat bread or things that contain gluten, because gluten is another one of those things that is thrown into things you would never even consider it should be in.
And don't be fooled anymore by the term whole grain. The government gets to define what whole grain means. You might think you know what whole grain means, but the government has cleverly gone in, just like with organic. The government defines what organic means. The government defines what whole grain means. So if they decide that whole grain just means like, oh, we only used wheat, that's whole grain, or whatever, or we used all part of it, including crap you can't digest, then they will give your child like more. It doesn't mean the nice seedy artisanal bread that you buy at the bakery. It means that whatever the government's definition of it is in bread. So they're doing the same thing they did with the original food pyramid of, we're going to have lots and lots of grains and plant proteins, which I'm not saying plant protein is all bad. I'm just saying that little growing children need meat. They need animal protein. They just do. You cannot grow your muscle tissue properly. Your hormones cannot develop. Your brain tissue cannot develop properly just eating grains.
And that's interesting that you bring that up. And it's very valid that you bring that up, because we do need all those building blocks to help us become as strong and muscly and all those things. But, go look at Gerber's new ad campaign. Nothing but plant-based anything.
For babies?
For babies.
Oh, no.
the time I saw it on the commercial, I about fell over. I'm thinking, good Lord, it is so wonderful that I don't have a young one to feed, because that, yeah, they're all green packages, and they come in those little, not the little jars like what I remember feeding my kids. Of course, I ended up
Little
making my
squeezy
own.
things, the
Yeah,
little
little squeezy
squeezy.
things. But yeah, oh yeah, because that's where the new babies need to go hang out.
Unbelievable.
So
That is
yeah.
really, really scary because when my eldest daughter was a baby, and
Mhm.
I nursed all three of my kids, but she at about 4.5 months of age, she went from being this thriving, robust, roly-poly little baby to suddenly she was just losing weight like crazy. And
Right,
I was nursing her and I went to the lactation. They're like, you're producing plenty of milk. We don't know what's going on. And she got emaciated, like all in a couple of weeks. She just lost a
right.
ton of weight. She turned kind of blue. I'm running into the pediatrician. I'm like, do something. What do you, well,
Yeah.
what do you want me to do? He's like, put her on formula, force feed her food, put her on cereal early. She needs to gain weight. I was like, she's not ready for solids. Help me. I finally went in and caused a scene, much to the chagrin of my ex-husband. He's like, what do you expect him to do? I'm like, draw blood, look for something. The doctor's
Yeah.
like, what am I looking for? I said, I don't know, but my daughter's blue. Something's wrong. So I stood there. I said, I'm not leaving until you do. So they've somehow found a vein. They took her blood. They sent us home within hours. I get a phone call. You need to go to the hospital immediately with your
Mhm.
daughter, and
Mhm.
both of you are sick. I'm like, what's wrong with us? Well, I get there. They tell me she has megaloblastic anemia, which means that the little red blood cells were malformed, almost like sickle
Right,
cells. They couldn't
right.
carry oxygen. That's why she was turning blue, and that's why she was lethargic and not eating.
Okay.
And so she had that. And my B12 levels were crazy low. They said, are you a vegan? I said, oh, hell no. I'm a meat eater from, way back.
Right,
They said, well, then you have developed an autoimmune condition called pernicious anemia, where your body no longer absorbs the B12 only comes from animal products.
right.
Only, hear me now. It only comes from animal products, and my body was not absorbing it. And as such, you store about 6 months in your liver, but I'd used up the liver stores. That's how she was doing fine. And then she wasn't.
Right.
And what it does in an infant, because she could only get it through me, is that your red blood cells, a baby that's not getting B12 vitamins will not develop red blood cells to carry oxygen properly. You could accidentally retard your baby, like make them literally mentally
Right.
retarded. She, as it was, no cognitive damage, but she had fine motor and gross motor delay. She had to see a neurologist and had to go for early intervention from just that 1 month of being deprived B12, which was not my fault. We couldn't have known, right? We gave her
Right.
B12 shots.
You had no way of knowing. Yeah.
Soon as she got the B12, she was fine. And now I take a supplement. She's absolutely fine. She doesn't have the condition. But the other thing I learned is people go, well, that's okay. We'll just spray the food with B12 vitamins. Like it's in the food. It's supplemented. Another thing to note, B12 in its synthetic form, I'm giving you guys a little nutrition lesson because this is what they're going to do to your school food. They already do. We supplement, but you don't need your meat. It's called cyanocobalamin. What do you think the cyan comes from? It's called cyanide.
Mhm.
It's used as a preservative for the synthetic version of B12 because unfortunately it's not very stable. Okay. So your body, your liver specifically, has to take that cyanide out. It's a poison. I mean, it's not going to kill you, but it has to remove it. That's effort. And whatever B12 is left now has to be what's called methylated. I mean, it has to be turned into usable form by your body. By the time your body gets done doing the work to
Mhm.
turn the B12 into something that would have been bioavailable in meat. I eat a burger, it's done.
It's there. Yeah.
It's there. Now your body's done all this extra work, which strains your systems, and whatever's left over is the minimum amount of nutrition, and it's synthetic. It's not what your body was designed to do. Some people, and I'm one of them, I just won the lottery, I guess. Some people, and it's more common than you think, don't methylate their own vitamins. They can't do it. The body won't do it, and you'll never know. You
Yeah.
know how you usually find out that you were one of the ones that couldn't methylate properly? You develop cancer. So or you just continue to be vitamin deprived, but not so much that it shows up on your blood tests, just enough that you're depressed, you're
Mhm.
tired, you have like nervous agitation and anxiety. B12 deficiency, because it's a water soluble vitamin, it causes exacerbation of your stress reaction. So not eating meat is going to cause B12 deficiency in almost all of our children because they need more than we need as adults.
Yep.
Their bodies, their muscles, their brains are not going to get enough oxygen. You need your B vitamins. B12 in particular, and supplementing. If it's, you can go get methylated B12. It's expensive. You know, it's cheaper. Beef.
Yep, it is. And here's another vitamin that is one of our unsung heroes, and that's vitamin D. And everybody will go, oh, we'll just go outside and get some sun. Well, honey, what do you see going on with the weather? What do you see happening?
Not to mention, they want you putting sunscreen on constantly. So if you're
which
outside
that's
in
not
sunscreen,
full of garbage.
Right. So if you're not putting chemical sunscreen on yourself, which has its own carcinogens in it, you can't even absorb the sun. And while you do only need about 15 minutes a day or something to be outside, and all kids should be outside in the sun and everything like that, they're giving kids less time outside, less recess every year, etc. So they're not really getting their time in the sun.
No,
they're not getting vitamin D. So we get it through our dairy products, but you also need vitamin C to be able to absorb it, et cetera, et cetera. All of these things work together. Our ancestors knew this, like our grandparents knew this, like by common sense. They just knew it from observation. I should eat an orange. I should have some, I should have some dairy products. I should have this is how they were strong and healthy. I went and visited, perhaps you have too. I went to Colonial Williamsburg one time, and I took my kids when they were very small, and we went through the child experience of Colonial Williamsburg. I thought, I want my kids to see what it's like to be a colonial child. Okay. And they had the kids dress in the little colonial garb and do the work. Like, here, let's go do what a child age 3 or 4 would have done during that time period. This is the well. This is the well where you get the water that you'd have to carry home. And you have those look like the rod that goes on your shoulder, or you had to carry the buckets.
Yeah.
They filled the buckets with the water. These are buckets that a 4 or 5-year-old or something would have had to carry. And they told us adults, they're like, lift the bucket. I was pretty strong at the time. I was much better shape than I'm in now. Couldn't lift it off the ground. We were incredulous. We're like, how is that possible? How could a child have done that? They said the bodies of these kids, because of the physical labor they were doing, the diet that they had, etc. He said they were extraordinarily strong. They would put our kids to shame as far as the physical strength. They were very weak in terms of their immune systems because of all the bugs and they didn't have any antibiotics. They didn't have, that. So if you caught a bad cold, you might die. If you got pneumonia, you might die.
Right.
They leached them and stuff. But in terms of muscle strength, bone strength, puts us we're brittle. We're fragile little creatures compared to our ancestors who used to eat what they grew, what they farmed, no preservatives, nothing. Right. So this is something that we need to remember when the government's going, oh, we're going to tell you what's in the food and it's all for your child's health.
Yes. Just remember what the government defines, the government controls, and we're going to leave it at that.
We're going to define school. We're going to define health. We're going to define wellness. We're going to define mental health. We're going to define gender. We're going to define social and emotional health. They're defining it. Not you.
And you're buying it, but you don't
you're paying for it. But pay for it. Do you have a choice? No. It's like, so I don't know. Lynn, this is something, I'm so glad you brought this to our attention, because this went way off I didn't even realize. I've always been very, very skeptical of the school dietary programs. And I already know that the whole school, whole child, whole community garbage is wanting to medicate our kids. But food is, like you said, food is medicine. Yeah. You are what you eat. And it's not just that you are what you eat in terms of the food, but you are the ideas that you consume too.
Yeah, you are. You absolutely are. And this is huge. And I'm so glad that you wanted us to talk about this, because as I said, we really need to be talking about this a heck of a lot more than just 1 hour on one show.
Without a doubt. So in addition to sharing all of the resources that you were so kind as to give me prior to the show in the description, what else? And there's lots of articles that Lynne has written. I've got down below. There's some videos, some interviews that she's done. I encourage you to digest all of it. Go down the rabbit hole for yourself. Like I said, I am quite sure there's some skepticism that's been generated from the show, and that's fine. By all means, please do your homework. Your child gets one chance to grow up strong. There's a lot of damage you cannot undo. Case in point, bone mass. Whatever bone mass you develop by the time your child hits an actual adulthood, like 18, they're pretty much done. In other words, if you don't develop really strong bones, which comes from calcium and all the stuff, by that time, you can only ever get back to wherever your best was. You can't do it. There's a window. And that's true also of your cognitive ability. So there are certain things that you can't go back and fix after the fact. That's why we have little malnourished kids in war-torn countries. There's only so much that can be done for them if they've gone a long period of time with being malnourished. We seem to know this about animals, but it's true of humans too. We're not that different.
It is. It absolutely.
So what else can they do? Where else can they go, or where should they find you besides
CommoncoreDiva.com? You can find me there. And then the Liberty Bells, and coming soon, TECN TV out of DC.
Oh, awesome. TV. That's great.
Woohoo. And Catching Fire News as well.
Catching Fire News. Right. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
So thank you to everyone who has tuned in and watched this. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe to both of us so you can stay up to date. Lynne is on this stuff. You've been doing, what is it, 25, 30 years? You've been digging into this stuff?
It's going on to 25 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm a Jane come lately over here to this level, but if you really want to dig in and find out what's going on, Lynne is the go-to person. So I am so grateful that you've shared this with us. Thanks to everybody for watching, and we will see you again next time.